I'm gonna have to mute it real quick. Okay, all right, we're ready to go. Good morning. This is Thursday, October 7th. Welcome to the Technical Advisory Committee. Jackie, can you help us with roll call, please?
Yes. Kelly Mullen.
Present.
Lisa Butterfield.
I'm here. Thank you.
Ian Pretendon.
Here.
Kurt Dietrich.
Here. Good morning.
Mitchell Fink.
Here.
Sandy Freeland.
Sandy's absent.
Dan Inouye.
He's absent.
Elaine Wiseman. Or Mitch Markey for her.
Mitch and Elaine are both absent.
Julie Olander.
Here.
Julie
Mhm.
Olander.
I'm sorry, Jackie.
Julie Olander.
Oh, she said she's here.
Alex Wolfson.
Absent.
Amber Sosa.
I'm here. Good morning.
Chris Tolley.
Here. Good morning.
Kevin Bennett. And the non-voting member, Enos Han.
So Kevin has just got admitted and the Enos is not here. So it looks like we have a quorum. And I just want to take a moment to introduce RTC staff that's here. We've got Jackie downstairs. So thank you, Jackie, for being there in case we have anyone from the public come in. And Mark Maloney from Transit, Stephanie Haddock from Finance, and Nancy Muse from Planning Communications. And did I miss anybody?
Rebecca, this is Jim. I'm here.
Sorry, I have you on my list. I just didn't say your name. I'm sorry. Jim's here, Jim Gee, and he'll have a presentation later. So with that, we have a quorum, and I'll hand it on over to the chair.
Thank you, Rebecca. Do we have an approval of the agenda? Item 1 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a recommendation to approve the agenda?
Kurt Dietrich, City Arena, motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Chris Tolley, Team RPA, second.
Thank you. Rebecca or Jackie, do we have any public comment?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay. Item 3 is approval of the September 2nd meeting minutes. Do we have approval of those minutes?
Julie, this is Kelly. Recommend approval.
Thank you, Kelly. Do I have a second?
Chris Tolley, Team RPA, second.
Thank you, Chris. All right.
Julie, just for the record, I got a direct message from Kevin. He's having difficulty hearing and speaking, so he's going to log in again, just so you know.
All right, thank you for that. All right, so item 4 is acknowledgement of receipt of a presentation on the Reno International Airport landslide operations study. Now, I'm not sure who's presenting that. Is there?
Yep, we have a presentation. Lisa Butterfield, who's also on the
Okay,
TAC,
Lisa, thank you.
do the presentation.
Sorry, I had difficulty unmuting myself. Can someone confirm they can see the presentation?
Yep.
So, yes.
Wonderful, thank you. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present an update on the landside operations planning study for the Reno Tahoe International Airport. For the record, I'm Lisa Butterfield, Manager of Planning and Environmental Services with the Airport Authority. And just to give some context to those of you who may not live and breathe airports, landside operations at an airport specifically refers to those functional areas that are pre-security. For the purposes of this study, we're looking at the public parking areas, the rental car facilities, the access roads, the curbside access where people pick up and drop off, essentially all the ground transportation offerings that are available to the public and to employees. At the Reno Tahoe International Airport, we have over 1,400 acres of land, but only about 140 of those acres are dedicated to landside operations. The rest of the land is for airside purposes. As a result, landside acreage is scarce, and when we start to forecast how we're going to develop it, we have to look at it comprehensively to make sure that we don't run out of land for the landside purposes. So back in 2020, right before the pandemic really started to take over, the rental car companies at the airport, in collaboration with a firm called Conrac Solutions, completed 60% design for a new rental car facility that I'm showing right here. As you can see, it's pretty big. This is the existing airport. This is the terminal building where the concourses are. This is the public parking structure. This would be the main entrance into the airport, Plum Lane. So the rental cars were proposing to build an extremely large 3 to 4 story ready return structure where you could pick up and drop off your vehicles. And then their quick turnaround area, which is where they fuel and do light maintenance and car washing, would be to the north of that. It would require a demolition of a number of our facilities, including part of our air cargo apron. So before we gave them the go-ahead to build that on our property under a P3 agreement, we decided that we needed to go back and look at our landside operations and make sure that allowing this facility to be constructed on our airport didn't pin us in and make it unable for us to meet other landside needs. So in January of 21, we embarked on a landside operations planning study. And the primary goals of that study were to ensure that all long-term facility needs are being met, that we also take an opportunity to address some pre-existing conditions we knew we had in that area. For instance, pedestrian safety, where pedestrians often jaywalk along Terminal Way and through the airport. And then we also wanted to preserve any non-aeronautical revenue that we had in those areas. We do own a number of buildings that are leased to commercial businesses, and that revenue was pretty important to the airport during the pandemic when aircraft weren't flying. So this area in yellow is the area that was under study as part of this effort. It starts down here. So this is National Guard Way and Aviation Way, which is on the south end of the airport. This is an area here that is primarily used for service lots for the rental cars. We also have some airfield maintenance facilities. There's an FAA navigational aid and a couple of other tenants. We also own the property where the Aloft Hotel and the Hyatt Place are. And then this is the primary area where our public parking and rental car facilities are. And then we also own land from the airport primary facility all the way down to Vassar Street. The buildings that we're showing in purple here on this exhibit are non-aeronautical tenants. So these are not tenant buildings that actually serve the airport operations. So we're nearly done with the study. We started it in March. The consultant is InterVistas Consulting. They're a national firm with an expertise in airport landside operations. They inventoried all of those areas, collected data associated with our public parking transactions, our employee parking utilization, the rental car transactions. They also did a level of service analysis on our roads and our curbside. And then they did a forecast for 20 years using planning activity levels, the 5-year mark, the 10-year mark, as well as the 20-year mark. And then they analyzed exactly what we were going to need. And we're in the middle of the alternate stage right now. And they've created a number of alternates that we have been slowly culling through, and I'll be sharing with you our top 4 alternates. But before I do that, I just wanted to share with you what our forecast is. And for airport forecasting purposes, we use terminology enplanements typically. And what enplanements refer to are those the people who are getting on the plane at Reno Tahoe International Airport. So it's about the halfway mark on our annual passengers. And we expect, based on forecast year of 2019, even with the pandemic in place, we do expect that in 20 years, we should get to about 3.3 million enplanements on an annual basis. And for those of you who have been in the area for a while, 3.3 million enplanements will be higher than our post 9/11 peak, which was in 2008. That is still significantly under the number of enplanements we had much earlier when Reno Air was a hub airport, was a hub airline at this airport. So the good news is our roadways, and this image that you're seeing right here are the interior roads at the airport. Our consultant team analyzed it all and determined that when we reach that 3.3 million, we will be no worse than a level of service C for our interior roads. The area shown in yellow are those level of service Cs. The two greens are A and B. And this does take into account the removal of the northbound flyover out of the airport onto 580. That will be part of NDOT's Spaghetti Bowl project in the later years. While we don't have a level of service issue on these roads, we do have, as I mentioned earlier, pedestrian access issues. There is no good entrance into the airport for pedestrians, and we do have a number of them. The pedestrian entrance is to the far north, and that's far enough from the main entry that we do see a lot of jaywalkers. One of the reasons why the pedestrian access is so far north is because it is difficult to maneuver, especially with baggage, through the parking structures or over the NDOT ramps system that you see within the airport. And in addition, there have been a lot of concerns about the fact that we have a single point of failure entrance and exit into the airport on Plum Lane. When there have been accidents at that intersection, we've had access into the airport primarily only through the freeway when that occurs. And then curbside is the opposite situation of our roads. We do have a curbside issue. We have it now. The existing curb length is pretty short at the airport. The effective drop-off length is only the portion in front of ticketing. While people do drop off in other locations, this is where our signage directs them. And during our peak times, which in the morning, our morning peak is what is our morning peak? Our morning peak is 4:15 in the morning to 5:15 in the morning. Our afternoon peak is 4:45 in the afternoon to 5:45. And so at that time, we already see backup traffic. You see double and triple parked cars dropping people off. The pickup situation is on the opposite side of the curb. It's not quite as bad, but our consultant has forecast that in the 20-year planning horizon, we can expect level of service F in terms of dropping people off at the airport, and we can expect a level of service D or E for the pickup time period. And then for public parking, we know we have a problem with parking. The pandemic created a number of novel situations for us. We were at capacity in 2019 already in terms of public parking. And even though we have less passengers than we have in 2019, we are actually even more over capacity in our public parking situation now. And that's primarily because of the loss of TNCs. A number of TNC drivers during the pandemic switched from driving people to delivering food and didn't come back. In addition, there has been less appetite among the public to actually use TNCs, where in the past they would have utilized a TNC. They're either using a family and friends drop-off situation or they're parking. So we are hugely over capacity right now. In terms of 20 years, we expect that we are going to need anywhere from 800 to 1,600 more public parking spaces than what we currently have. The rental car facilities are also undersized. What you see right here, the yellow line is the rental car facilities we have right now. And our consultant has forecasted that we already could utilize double the amount of rental car spaces that we currently have. In the 20-year horizon, that number triples. So One of the things they did do is they did validate the size of the program that was proposed by the rental car facilities. So that earlier image I showed you does accommodate the demand that is shown here. In addition, the rental cars need more quick turnaround area. And as I mentioned before, that's the area that's used for fueling, for vacuuming, for car washes, and for vehicle stacking while they are waiting for those services. And once again, the yellow line shows what they have. The red line shows what the rental cars have proposed, and the green bars show what our consultant has said that the Reno Airport could accommodate. So now that we know we have all of these issues, we had to come up with a number of alternates. The consultants came up with 9 different alternates families with a number of different versions in each one. Based on our staff outreach as well as input from the board, we've whittled that down to 4. And these are very rudimentary alternates that you're looking at right now. And they are all focused on siting rental car facilities and public parking. Those are the 2 biggest components with the largest mass. And once they go on our property, we're not going to be able to move them anytime soon. So there's a lot of time and effort spent on figuring that out. And then the other items that we need to address, such as curbside, will be addressed in the refined alternates. So from an operational standpoint, this green area, the green area here is the public parking facilities now. And alternate 1 is essentially the rental car's proposal. So the new rental car facility would be the brand new structure to the north of the public parking. The quick turnaround is the area in yellow shown here. We would have to extend our loop road to circle that facility. And as you can see with the aerial photograph in the background, there's a significant impact to our apron area where we park air cargo, as well as a number of buildings and an entrance into the airport. But this option will give us it'll give us over 800 new public parking spaces, and it meets the rental car demand. From a traffic perspective, the traffic doesn't change, circulation doesn't change particularly much right now. All public parking entry and entrance are within the airport loop road. The rental car drop-off would still stay on the curbside area. The rental car, once they have picked up their vehicles, they would exit back into our existing loop road and then exit out either on Plum or to the freeway infrastructure. And the jockey traffic for the rental cars, that's when they take the return cars and they take them to the long-term service lots. That would still continue to happen on Terminal Way. The service lots are the blue areas right here. So it doesn't change traffic, but it does reflect significantly more traffic. Alternate 2 is similar, except instead of placing the rental cars within a loop road, we would put the rental cars directly north of our existing loop road. Public parking would be able to expand in the existing footprint. We could build a new structure if we do need the 1,600 spaces. The rental cars would take a significant portion of our frontage on Terminal Way. This would cause a shift in traffic. In order for picking up the rental car as well as dropping off the rental car, those access points are going to now be directly on Terminal Way. So that traffic would not go into the loop road unless people wanted to drop passengers off at ticketing or pick them up at baggage claim. Access to this facility would be a covered walkway from our baggage claim directly to the ready return facility and the customer service building for the rental cars. And that is about a 500-foot walk from the baggage claim. That's a significantly further walk for those passengers to the ticketing hall. And then the jockey traffic would stay on terminal the way it is currently operating. Alternate 8 is the only alternate that we looked at that requires acquisition of property. So this would be, this is a commercial building that's located at the right by the freeway and Plum. This is the Sure Stay Hotel, and there's some vacant lots here that are also owned by the Sure Stay Hotel. So this option puts the rental cars off our property. In order for us to make this one work, we'd obviously need willing sellers. And while there's a lot of benefits to this, the challenge here is that we want parking right away. The rental cars want more facilities right away. And this would obviously take the longest in order to facilitate this option. And the final alternate that we are still looking at is very similar to alternate number 2. The difference is we start the rental car facilities on the far north end of our property along Vassar Street. And then there's some other things that we are considering as we are further refining these alternates. The customer service experience is pretty important to us. And so we don't want any of these alternates to really negatively impact the experience that they're currently having. This shows walking distance of similar sized airports. So these are all the airports that are immediately bigger than us or immediately smaller than us in terms of enplanements. And currently you can see right now for our public parking users, the walking distance to the parking structure is extremely good in comparison to the airports that surround us. And then the walking distance to the surface lot, while it's high in this number, there's a massing of similarity here between Burbank and Albuquerque here. So it is comparable. So we don't want the public parking distances to differ dramatically from what we're seeing here. And currently none of our alternates will do that. The other consideration is obviously walking distance for rental car passengers. There's a much bigger swing in terms of a rental car experience. We do have a couple of outliers within that comparable airport group. Burbank and Providence both have dramatically longer walks. And that's not something we're trying to emulate, especially since right now we have such a good walking distance for our rental cars, being that they're directly across from baggage claim. The other things we're taking under consideration, as I mentioned earlier, is the eventual removal of that flyover onto I-580 to the north. We're hoping that when that does go away, we'll be able to capture some additional public parking into that area that is would be available to us when the flyover goes away. And then the last thing we're looking at, and these are really high level, is ways to address the single point of failure in and out of the airport. So we are looking at this circle here is where Plum Lane is right now. We're looking at potentially bringing a entrance only into the airport slightly further south on Terminal. And we're also looking at adding an exit that would be between the rental car facilities and the public parking. And then this is just kind of a snapshot. We're looking at if the rental cars do go along Terminal Way, we're trying to figure out how those ingress and egress movements are going to happen. We've asked the consultant to look at lining up driveways with existing streets that are on the opposite side of Terminal. These are all obviously very rudimentary, but I am hoping for any feedback from this the Technical Advisory Committee at this point. It would be greatly appreciated. And then our next steps is going to be continued outreach, continued refinement of the alternates. And our board is hoping to identify a preferred alternate at a November 2nd workshop. And that's all I have. But I am happy to take any questions from the Technical Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Do we have some questions for Lisa?
Hey, Julie, this is Bill Thomas. I have some if no one else does, or I can wait.
Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate this. Very helpful. So, you know, the airports, both Reno Tahoe and Reno State are critically important to the transportation network, but they're also impediments to the surface transportation because there's such a large block of property that, you know, we can't go through. So it's like a lake or a mountain or anything like that, you know, geographically in our community where we have to figure out how to move people around it. And so my first question is, and maybe it's even for RTC staff because maybe they've already brought it up, but it seems like there's 2 points of vulnerability to the community and to the airport. One of them you mentioned, which is Plum Lane. So right now, an issue we're dealing with Plum Lane that still hasn't been resolved in my mind is the fact that we have Wooster High School on a major street that's probably only going to have more traffic, particularly as the airport grows. And we're struggling with some desire in the community for that road to be slowed down or be restricted because of pedestrians, which my understanding when NDOT looked at it, it very quickly becomes failure if you do that. So it's a vulnerability from the standpoint, like you said, if that's the main way to service the airport and the airport's moving forward, there's an external constraint that could have some serious consequences to the operation of the airport. So that's question one. The second one related to that is, I think we all know as a general transportation practice, a lot of people would prefer to be on the highway and the freeways. So as the spaghetti bowl gets done and more people go onto the freeway, that certainly adds a lot of capacity. But as we saw when there was that spill, where basically the freeway was totally shut down, people had to find other ways. So my question becomes one of, if we think about Terminal Way, right, it kind of functions almost like a back road or a side road because it's basically just 2 lanes. It's not a complete street. It doesn't have, it has bicycle lanes on it, but I would say it's kind of like I would describe it as kind of a afterthought in the way the whole transportation network. It comes down on the south end there to a right-hand turn, right? It's not free flow. I know once we get down to Moana and starts going through the Neal Road neighborhood, it has a constraint, but at least it does connect into, Airmotive, Moana, whatever. I can't remember where it turns into the name change, but the question is one of terminal and what is the future of terminal? And is this the right time to bring it up? Because I know you guys are constrained by what you do with property because of FAA. If we came in as RTC and said, hey, the community really wants to, let's just say for scenario discussion, turn terminal into a 2-lane road with bicycle facilities on both sides and a center turn lane, much like we've done, in some areas of town, we would have to come to the airport and say we need some right of way. And I know at least as you start going south, it gets closer to, I'm guessing in your terminology, more away from Landside and in part to probably the airport operations. You're talking about narrowing the space there, where the runway is. Not that I think we would get into any impacts on the runway, but, and I don't know in your world how that works as far as roads going by airports. So that's kind of the second big question is, are we missing an opportunity or just the right time with your facility planning for us to bring up that issue? And I know just like eyeballing it, because obviously our office is here on Terminal Way is getting busier and busier, particularly during the peak hours. And my belief is that, short term, maybe it just has to do with the fact that the freeway's under construction and people are bypassing it. But it also might be just a reflection as the community grows of another north-south way to get into Sparks, because you can follow Terminal all the way into Sparks and avoid the freeway. So the question becomes one of long-term, if people start using that as an alternate during peak hours in particular, and we don't plan for that, what's that not only going to do for the community, but also for the airport, right? It doesn't do you any good if your one point of access is functioning at level of service E, or it's all bound up, people can't get off the freeway, just a bad experience for everyone all the way around. And then, not to dominate this, but a couple other questions. One of them is there value in the scenarios that maybe don't include moving the facilities, further up Terminal, but to take your extended loop road and have a connection into Terminal so somebody's not, they're given another way for traffic to go so they could get back onto Terminal without having to go through the Plum Lane intersection. So if somebody wants to go north on Terminal right now, they'd have to drive all the way back to Plum Lane, then take a right and then head north. And it's just putting more traffic back into that challenged intersection long-term. I guess I lied, I have 2 more. So then the next question was on charging stations. I know NV Energy in the state, they've been talking about money to enhance EV charging. And I wondered if you'd been approached or you guys have been talked to about using any of that money or making a pitch for EV charging stations to be included at the airport as somehow benefiting expanding the EV charging network. And then lastly, and maybe Jim and Mark will have already dealt with this or tell me I'm crazy on this, but as far as the parking and the connectivity and the movement of people around, is Flex Ride. I know fixed route doesn't work very well for us. There's just not enough of the demand and the way the airport operates for us to justify putting a fixed route there that really feeds some of your need. But Flex Ride is a new, geographic area service, and whether that has been something we've talked to you about, or maybe we've already talked about it and decided it doesn't make sense. So sorry to be dominating this, but I just want to put all those on the table.
That's a lot of questions to answer. I'm going to try to take them in backwards order. Transit. I'm not aware of any recent conversations. My understanding is we do have the one transit route that comes into our loop road and has a stop near baggage claim. And then there's service also along Terminal Way. And I think the Terminal Way service is much more frequent. We're looking at, when we're looking at these alternates, we're looking at the potential. You'll see GTC here. We're looking at the potential of making more of a combined ground transportation center. So shuttles, taxis, rental cars, all the transit offerings except public parking might have the same entrance and exit. So anybody who is leaving the airport and not going to public parking would essentially go in the exact same direction. And then you'd have those choices there. We are definitely, open to any discussion with RTC regarding adjustments to transit service to make it make sense for RTC. I agree that the utilization in the loop road on that one route is pretty low. And there's probably much more travelers coming to or from the airport on the bus that are actually using the service that runs along Terminal Way. And I'm sorry, I don't remember which numbers those are.
Row 12.
Thank you. And then electric charging. Yes, that is something we are looking at. We're looking at potentially once we refine these alternates, designating an area specifically in public parking that would be full of charging stations. We've done a recent project to put electric charging stations on the air side that allows the equipment like the baggage loaders and the tugs to all be electric, but we are looking at all of our future planning is going to have expanded electric charging. I think right now we only have about 2 or 3 charging stations that are currently in the public parking structure right now, and they're not very well advertised. So it's really not well known that they're there. But yeah, we are looking at expanding that significantly. So thank you for bringing that up. I don't know that we've had any conversations about what funding sources we would use for that. And we're not sure if we're eligible for some of those programs, primarily because most of the federal programs for ground transportation at the airports is aimed towards transit, subways, trains coming in. They're trying to decrease the number of cars coming to the airports with federal monies, not increasing them. And most of our alternates are looking at ways to accommodate vehicle traffic. Let's see what else. Is it the right time to bring up potentially, I'm assuming you're talking about increasing the capacity along Terminal Way by expanding the right of way. That's definitely something we are open to. I will say that the last time RTC did work along Terminal, the road is not in the complete right of way still. So there is actually room. I don't know that there's, our landscaping along here is in the terminal right of way. So I don't know if there's enough room, and maybe somebody from your engineering team knows, I don't know if there's enough room for an additional lane in the existing right-of-way without actually having to acquire some. I will say that acquiring right-of-way from a federally obligated airport is a long and time-consuming process. They always get approved, but it takes forever. And your team that worked with the widening of McCarran to the east of the airport can probably tell you some painful stories about how long it took for us to get federal approval to widen McCarran to the east into the airport. What else? What am I missing? Does that get you what you want, Bill?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I don't know if I brought it up was that question of the pedestrians, because I know just, since we're so close, a lot of it is watching what people do. And I'm sure you know this, a lot of the people who walk in come from those areas north of Plum. You see a lot of people walking into the airport, and like you said, they're crossing right now in what looks like the area where potentially, if the preferred alternative goes forward, would be where the new car rental facility is. So the question becomes one of, where on the roadway system that we manage, which is terminal, where do we provide for pedestrians to get from that, zone where they're coming from, the hotels, parking, whatever they're doing, to walk into your facility? And like you said, it's not really very user-friendly if we push them down to Plum, because then it goes right into the parking garage. Is there going to be some kind of plan for pedestrians to get into the terminal that goes through the extended parking garage, or are you going to want to push them to the north so they have to do that 500 foot along the new covered parking to the potential further out parking garage?
We are looking at trying to create a safe, dedicated pedestrian route through the parking garage, because that tends to be where the pedestrians want to go. I will say that we're one of the reasons why there's a pedestrian issue there. This area in front of the commercial business here is owned by the airport, and it's actually a crew lot. And so they're not airline crew that are flying the planes here. They're airline crew that live in the area and are using Reno to get to the actual hub airport that they're flying out of. Nearly all of those people jaywalk. They know the fastest way into the airport. They cut through the rental car facilities. They cut through the parking garage. They cross this landscaping extremely unsafely. We've seen them climb fences. And so relocating that crew lot will decrease some of the pedestrian issues, but we are looking at potentially some kind of sky bridge system that gets them to the second floor of the parking structure, because that would connect them to the sky bridge on the other side of the parking structure. Any other questions?
This is Julie
Comments?
Olander. I was just following up on that pedestrian. Since the bus goes along terminal, I'm wondering where it stops, and if there's not a way you can sort of look at using that place where they stop as also a place to put the pedestrian connection, because it seems to me that those people are probably also challenged to getting into
jump
the
in on that.
terminal.
Mark Maloney, Director of Public Transportation. They're actually where the Route 12 stops on terminal. There is a paved walkway into the airport. I think the problem is it's a step, good amount of steps away from that intersection where that crew is doing the jaywalking area. So they could go and cross, at Plum, go down the sidewalk and go in the same access that the customers that use the bus could, and that'd be a safe pedestrian movement. But it's a lot more steps, and they're obviously not willing to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Julie, this is Rebecca. I know the city of Reno did some pedestrian crosswalk improvements because there were some issues there. So that has been implemented already too.
Yes, there's a pedestrian initiated stop right over here, right by the pedestrian access, and it's made it extremely safer. I don't know that it's encouraging more people to use it, but it is definitely safer.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it's a pedestrian activated push button flasher. So thank you for that clarification.
Do we have any more questions for Lisa? Well, thank you, Lisa. This was great. I really appreciate this update and keeping us in the loop. It's a lot of good information.
Thank you so much.
So do I have an acknowledgement of receipt for this presentation? Do I have can I get someone to acknowledge this presentation? Sorry, I just lost connection.
So the motion that we'd like to see is somebody to make a motion to accept the report.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
Crystal A. Team RPA, so moved.
Do I have a second?
This is Kelly, second.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can we get a vote, Julie?
Yes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, moving on to item 5, to provide feedback and acknowledge receipt of a report on the proposed provisional January 2022 RTC Ride, RTC Access, RTC Flex Ride service change.
That's a tongue twister. Thank
Yeah.
you. And Jim Gee will be presenting for us today. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Gee. I'm the Service Planning and Innovation Manager for RTC. And I'm here to talk about some provisional service changes as a result of transportation employee staff shortages. There we go. As I mentioned, like everyone else in the transportation industry, we are struggling with staffing. And you see the articles in the newspaper with Washoe County Schools and even the Reno Gazette Journal delivery drivers. And if you're a transit like I am, every day there's a story about some transit system having to cut staffing or having to cut service because of inadequate staffing. And so what we are proposing are changes across the board with Ride, Access, and Flex Ride. All of our services would be impacted, but they're provisional changes based upon our staffing levels as we look at towards mid-November. Any changes that I'm talking about today would be effective on January 1st of next year. First, just a little bit of background on why there is such a labor shortage in the transportation industry. First, the total labor force is down primarily due to the pandemic. And that is not a surprise if you've read the news or watched the news. And you can see the chart in front of you that shows a steep decrease in the transportation labor force or the total labor force, which is simply not recovered yet. Related to that, the labor force participation rate is also down. And again, the same very similar looking chart, a steep decrease in the participation rate due to the pandemic, with that recovery not yet happened. And then finally, in the transportation sector itself, there has been a huge, very steep increase, specifically since the start of the pandemic. A lot of that is delivery jobs, your Amazons, your FedEx, and so on, because a lot of people were ordering online as opposed to going to the store. And additionally, there's a significant increase in the number of gig economy jobs, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the DoorDashes, all those type of delivery jobs, which have basically siphoned people away from the transportation sector. A lot of additional reasons, folks hesitant to work because of COVID. The lack of childcare and in-person schooling has created issues for us. A decrease in available CDL training. You have people that are retiring normally, and normally there's a pipeline of people coming in to replace those people. But when COVID happened, CDL training went way down because CDL is one of those jobs that you really can't train online or train virtually. And so that pipeline of incoming CDL folks wasn't nearly as large as the pipeline of people leaving the CDL industry. Additionally, certainly for us, we've had a lot of issues with, things such as the local legalization of marijuana, with having transit service, you have to be able to pass random drug tests, pre-employment testing, and a lot of folks are choosing to find different jobs where those testing requirements are not in place. So what we are proposing to do is a series of changes that crosses all of our services. Again, these are provisional changes. And first, starting with our fixed route service, which is RTC Ride, we took a look at our ridership recently and selected a series of trips based on time of day and also based upon that recent ridership. And those trips were selected to essentially give us the most bang for the buck. These are the trips that would harm the least people, but would give us the most benefit in terms of our staffing. And they represent about a 1.92 reduction in the total number of trips we provide. Here's a brief table showing those trips, and you can see it's a little bit of Route 9, Route 13, Route 16, Route 21, Route 26. But to summarize, these are trips that are primarily either early in the morning or very late at night. And again, they are selected because they have low ridership and they give us the biggest benefit in terms of being able to address our staffing issues. Next, on access, we have a number of labor shortage issues also related to our paratransit service. And so some of the proposed changes we are offering is first to change our reservation times to a consistent 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week. Right now, we function a little earlier in the morning to a little later at night during the week. We have different times on weekends. And so we're proposing to go to a consistent schedule 7 days a week that we can cover with one labor shift. Next is to align our service area for access to the ADA standard. Previously, RTA was following the ADA standard for service area. However, when we introduced our FlexRide services as pilot services, we did not reduce the ADA standard as a result of that, because essentially we wanted to test the FlexRide to make sure it would be successful. FlexRide has definitely been successful. And so now we're proposing to align our ADA access service with our fixed route service again. And then finally, we're going to aggressively continue to look at some additional agreements with private providers, such as the Uber and the taxi companies that we already have, to basically reduce the burden on our access fleet as best we can. On our FlexRide services, this is our microtransit service that's operating in some of our suburban areas. We have proposals to adjust the hours of service that service runs based upon the ridership, and also to look at our Tahoe service and really decide whether or not to keep it moving next summer based upon our driver availability. For FlexRide, we are proposing changes to all three of our services. For Sparks and North Valleys, we will be stopping the service a little earlier in the evening, but not changing the morning times, because as our ridership showed, the morning was really a good peak for us as we were taking a lot of folks to work. For our Verdi Somerset service, those are a little more substantial changes, but we're moving to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then 8 to 8 Saturday and Sunday. And then just a little bit of content on our Tahoe service and the summary of the lessons we learned last summer. This was a really challenging service for us. And as we struggled with a driver shortage, and we were leveraging our FlexRide, which is microtransit software, to really provide a service that wasn't microtransit in nature. It was a sort of a hybrid service between a commuter service and a traditional dial ride service. Additionally, we really selected a tough summer to provide that service. We had construction on Mount Rose Highway, which impacted the efficiency. We had COVID-19, of course, the forest fires, the smoke, the heat, and we also had a labor strike on our fixed route side, which has really spread our resources on our paratransit and FlexRide side, because we were using those same services to provide contingency service to folks who really needed it on a fixed route side. So just a little bit of summary on the results for our Tahoe service. For the ridership, total ridership for the summer was 342 folks. Our highest day was 26. But as you can see with the chart, May, essentially that's Memorial Day weekend. June was much better. July was much better. And this is really, we didn't start seeing any ridership impacts based upon labor shortages and the rest of the factors until late July. And then August, of course, was not great ridership. And that was a function of the forest fire, the Calder fire, the labor shortages that we had, and difficulty in just providing that service. In terms of destinations, this was not a surprise. Most of the folks using the service wanted to go to Sand Harbor, almost 2/3 of it, with Hyatt, Rayleigh's, and other being 15%. The other at 15% is a combination of trailheads and individual houses in the Incline Village area. And I would note that the way our service operated, it started at the Summit Mall in South Reno, went up Mount Rose Highway to Incline Village in Sand Harbor, but one half of the scheduled trip had to be at the Summit Mall. So we were not basically competing against other transit services in the Incline Village area. In terms of ridership by day, the number one day was Saturday, which was not a surprise, but the number 2 and the number 3 days where ridership were Tuesday and Thursday. That was a surprise. And that really was a challenge for us operationally because our vehicle fleet and our driver pool was really designed so that we had capacity on the weekends, but we didn't have a lot of capacity for service Monday through Friday because we're sharing that fleet and that driver pool with Access and with Flex and with our other Flex Ride services. So those spikes on Tuesday and Thursday were definitely a challenge for us operationally. And then in terms of group size, 2/3 of the trips only had 1 or 2 people. That made it really not as efficient as we liked operationally. That could be a function of COVID. That could also be a function of our fare structure, which was $5 per person. And so if you have a large group, it became, very expensive to do a round trip to and from the lake. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about the proposed changes. Again, they are provisional changes as we are aggressively recruiting drivers and transportation workers, both with our fixed route contractor and our paratransit contractor. But as we look ahead, we want to have some provisional changes just ready in case our staffing levels are not there. So any questions?
Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate that information. It's discouraging to see that you're having challenges, fortunately. Anybody have questions? All right. Do I have a motion to accept, a motion to acknowledge receipt of the presentation?
Sosa, City of Sparks, so moved.
Thank you, Amber. Do I have a second?
Mitchell Finn, Washoe County, second.
Thanks, Mitch. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Right, motion carries. All right, the next item on our agenda is item 6, development updates. Do we have any development updates?
Julie, I've got a couple for City of Reno.
All right, Kelly, go ahead.
Thank you. So just for the group, November 3rd, we will be, the Planning Commission will be hearing the Regional Road Impact Fee program. And in terms of development in the city, we have several small tentative subdivision maps and multifamily projects. Village at Arrow Creek, 124 lots, that's near Arrow Creek in Zalesi, going to be heard by Planning Commission November 3rd. We have a couple of multifamily developments downtown, 24 lot multifamily at 2nd and Arletta. Also another called Vesta Street that is 40 unit multifamily at Holcomb and Vesta. And then for those who love Panera, we've got a new drive-through coming in at the South Virginia and Neal intersection in that Taco Bell Center. So that's all I have for the group this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else? All right. Our next is item 7, which is member items, and I'll go to the City of Reno. Do you have any items?
No, none at this time. Thank you.
Reno Tahoe Airport Authority.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. City of Sparks.
I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. FHAWA. Nobody?
They're not here.
Okay. Washoe County.
Mitch Fink, Washoe County. Nothing at this time. Thank you.
All right. Air quality.
There's nobody here today from air quality.
Okay. NDOT. TMRPA.
Nothing today. Thank you, though.
Thank you. School district.
Both school district and the Indian Colony are not here today.
Okay, that covers that. So do we have, moving on to item 8, agenda items for future TAC meetings? Anybody have any suggestions? I'm sure RTC can come up with some ideas. Do we have RTC staff items?
I don't believe we have any, at least I don't. I don't know if anybody on the call has any today.
All right, and then finally, item 10, do we have any public comment?
This is Dora Martinez. I would like to make a public comment, please.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so for the record, Dora Martinez, representing the Nevada Disability Peer Action Coalition. Just an advice to the airport authority, please reach out to Scott Youngs. He is the ADA coordinator, to make sure that you know what you guys are proposing to do is ADA compliant. His phone number is 775-682-9070. And for, I believe it was item 5 for Jim G, reducing the route is going to affect a lot of people who are in dialysis, and they're usually doing the morning times. So I hope you guys consider that, and we'll probably see you all next week at the Washoe County Commissioners Chambers. And another comment, I know I only have 3 minutes. For the Washoe County Commissioners, please make your chamber, the double doors, accessible. There's no power button. We can get into building A sometimes when the button is working. But usually when we get in, always we're stuck outside of the chambers and cannot get in for people who are using wheelchairs because they can't open the heavy doors. And also it's just disheartening that you all are, considering minimizing or just completely eliminating the RTC fixed ride, and that will affect the paratransit, especially during now when you guys are using our riders that access trained to drive the access buses, the paratransit, to switch them to flex ride and leaving people with disability behind. Sometimes they're stuck at stores for 2 hours waiting for somebody to go get them, especially when they're already scheduled 3 days in advance. So with that said, I end my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comment?
We have not received any additional public comment.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Item 11 is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Crystal, ITMRPA is so moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Amber Sosa, City of Sparks, second.
Thank you, Amber. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All right, see you all next month. Have a good month. Thank you so
For the
much.
record, the time is 10 o'clock, just so we all have that documented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.